Just for the recording, we've just done an intro and gone through the agenda for today's meeting. We're now just going through usual business and the approval of minutes. We're approving the minutes from the last meeting. If anyone would like to make a motion for that.
Hi, Michael. This is Chris Skeen. I'd like to motion that we approve those minutes.
Thanks, Chris. Do we have anyone to second that?
Happy to second, Jamie.
Okay, thanks, Jamie, for that. So I will launch a poll, approve these minutes. So you should see that vote now. Okay, I'll just give that another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'll end that poll. So we have 9 affirmative plus 1 in the chat, so 10 affirmative, 0 negative, and 6 abstained. So that motion has passed. Thanks, everyone. So jumping back to updates. So we have some standing action items that have been carried over. The first one there is our standard CDG and TDG principles for inclusion. That I think we can actually close that action item now. We don't need to track it from meeting to meeting. There has been a harmonisation group set up between the CDG and TDGs. We can escalate any issues that we have to that group. We can seek advice from that group. So it is in place, and we'll feed back anything that happens in those harmonisation group meetings back to the TDG. So I think we can probably close that action item unless anyone else thinks that we need to keep tracking that one. Okay. No specific objections to that, so we'll close that action item. The second action item was about the follow-up for the My Health Record Policy Reference URI. In the last meeting, Jai had advised on the specific reference in the legislation that we can use. So I've gone away and looked at that, how we might reference it. And we do have that on the agenda item for today, so we can go through that. If Jai does join us, or anyone else from the department here, probably best that they're here when we go through that. So we might shuffle the agenda and see if we get someone from the department, Jai or someone else from the department joins us who can talk to that, or carry it on over to the next meeting. They're not here, not available. Some other updates. The fire work group meeting this week, I made some decisions on AU base. So as part of eRequesting, our IG has dependencies on AU base. One of the things we had pushed to the fire work group was for looking for a patient internal identifier to support eRequesting. So that was presented at what's been through a number of fire work group meetings, but the proposal was voted on in the last meeting this Wednesday, and that motion has passed. So there will be a new patient internal identifier added to the patient resource in AU base. That will then be inherited by AU core, and we will also inherit it in eRequesting. So that's a good outcome for us. It's something we pushed up to the fire work group, and they've actioned that for us. Other ones that are relevant that are coming up in the next fire work group meeting are about a new AU-based coverage type code system and a value set to go with that. So this has some relevance to us in eRequesting. Just quickly show that here, these proposals that are being looked at here. So this is about a new code system in AU base for Australian billing concepts like Medicare and the public hospital, NDIS, home care packages, and ADF. So that's going to be discussed at the next meeting, and then a value set to go with that. It works. So the value set would go in a new coverage type value set would go in AU base. That would reference the concept coverage type and self-pay codes and V3 Act codes. So this would be a new value set that then would be available to us. In eRequesting, we have created our own value set, I think, currently. But this gives us the opportunity, we'll just have a quick look at that. Requesting, we have a coverage profile. In this, we are referencing AU eRequesting coverage type and self-pay codes. So we have our own value set in the IG. If those changes make it into AU base, we would then be able to update the eRequesting IG to reference that AU base value set rather than having our own specific one. So keep an eye on that. Anyone who's got interest can attend the firework group meetings. They're held fortnightly on a Wednesday. They're in the Spark calendar. Everyone's welcome. But hopefully those will go through, and then that'll benefit us in eRequesting. So I was going to go through the update of or a discussion on the consent withdrawal policy, which was the action item that was with Jai. Doesn't look like Jai's with us today. So we might defer that to the next meeting and come back around to that one. So jump ahead of that. The next agenda item was to look at clinical context coding. So as a summary, in our last meeting, we made some decisions on the clinical context via resource type. So in our last meeting, we agreed that document reference was going to be used for clinical context. And we also had a proposal for how we would model clinical context, but we decided to not include the document reference type because we hadn't yet made a decision on the most appropriate type. So that discussion was continued on in the Zoom chat. So these were the options that had been discussed in that Zoom thread. I will copy that link, put it in the chat if anyone wants to read what's been going on in that chat. Jump back to the page. So a number had been talked about. Our primary candidate originally was referral note. There was some concern that was being used in My Health Record for another purpose. So there was some concern around that. There was other ones that potentially could have been used. There was requested imaging studies, but there was no pathology equivalent. There was reason for study that was considered, and also summary note. But what's become apparent is that there's a new code that's going to be added to LOINC in the August 2025 release, which will be clinical note. So it looks like that would be the most appropriate for us. It's exactly what we're talking about. It doesn't conflict with something else being used elsewhere. We don't have to create a local one. It'll be a LOINC code. So that looks like it would be a really good candidate for us. The only problem is it won't be until the August release. We will be publishing eRequesting for ballot in August, early August as well. So it doesn't mean we can't add it. We can still use it. We can add it to the ballot snapshot. It just means it won't validate until it is published in LOINC and makes it through all our terminology servers and the like for validation. I'd be interested in anyone who's got any comments or thoughts or about whether we're comfortable that clinical note looks like it'll be the appropriate one. We can come back with more information once we have actually got the details, but that's the advice we've got, that there will be a new code. Is there anyone who's not comfortable with us using that and prefer us using one of the ones that's already been discussed? Is there general consensus that we're happy with that?
I was just wondering, Michael, do we actually have the definition of what their clinical note is and what it's meant to capture?
No, we don't. Yeah,
Not yet.
Michael Osborne has been talking to them about it. He believes it's going to be appropriate. I think that's what we would do, though, is when we have the definition, we'll bring it back to this group for a decision to say, yes, we're happy, that's appropriate, that's the one we want to use. Hopefully we can do that prior to it being published. We'll have the draft of it to make sure it's appropriate. So I don't think we're looking to make a decision today on that. I think it's just that's the path we're looking at for the moment, unless someone feels strongly that, no, we should be using a referral note or another one.
No, that's fine. I just think as long as we note that it's pending the definition.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we definitely want to make sure the definition aligns with what we're trying to do. Okay, so that's the update on that one. If there's no other comments, we can move on to our change requests. Okay, so these are the change requests we've got slated for today. These were sent out in an email about a week ago if anyone wanted to have a look or comment on them. Now, I've put these in an order that I think are probably logical for important things to get through in this order, because we may not get through them all depending on how the conversation goes. We may fly through it. We'll see how it goes. The important thing here is normative changes. So these are changes to profiles in the IG. We're probably looking at making most of those changes, trying to get those changes across now in this meeting, because they can then go in the snapshot for the next testing event, which is in late June in Brisbane. So we'd like as many of the normative changes that we can get into that snapshot so they can be tested. The informative changes are the guidance and the like that goes around the IG. So they're less important. They're very important still for ballot, but they're less important to get into the snapshot for the IG. Happy if anyone's got any preference on any they want to go to first. Otherwise, we can probably work through the list from top to bottom. Everyone's comfortable with that?
Hi, Michael.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Well, we'll jump into the first one. Now, Michael Osborne was going to talk to this one. He's running a bit late, so I'll have a go at it. If we get into the weeds a bit, we may have to wait for him to come back, but we'll see how we go. It's not working. Here we go. Okay. So this was a change request that was raised by Michael Osborne. So this one is that NCTS has released the RANSCAR radiology referral value set in the May 2025 NCTS release. In line with HL7 policy, the binding to AU eRequesting imaging request needs to change to point to the NCTS value set. And other parts of this change is update the STU note, removal of the internally defined ROV from the IG, and update the ROV link in terminology, and update the change for MD for this JIRA. So this is something we've been waiting on. We've been waiting for this value set to get published. It's now published, it's now available, which is great. Our interim workaround was that we put the value set within our IG. So I can show you what that looks like. We had our imaging request. So this was our guidance on the use of ServiceRequest.code and wanting to use the RANSCAR radiology referral value set. And we have a binding here to the RANSCAR radiology referral set. as our preferred binding. This reference, however, currently goes to a value set that is defined within our AU eRequesting IG. So we had temporarily put this in here because it wasn't published on NCTS. So we had put it in here so we could still use it, we could still test it. But that is now available on NCTS. And so this proposal is to now reference the NCTS version of value set and remove anything associated with our internal value set. Oh, good timing, Michael. I see you just joined us. I've done a run through of this JIRA, talking about us removing reference to the internal value set in our IG and referencing the NCTS published version of this now. Does anyone have any questions about that one? It's a good thing. It's something we've been waiting for. So it's nice it's happened now. Now, I can't make a motion given I'm the chair. Would anyone like to make a motion to accept this proposal?
I'll move it, Michael.
Michael, does anyone like to second it?
I'll second it, Michael.
Thanks, Angus. Are there any other questions or comments anyone has on this before we launch into a vote? No. Okay, I will launch a poll for the motion to accept this proposal. Oh, let's share that. So you should see a vote now. This is to accept this proposal to reference the NCTS Manscale radiology referral value set and make these other changes to the IG. I'll just give that another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in that poll. We have 18 affirmative plus 1 in the chat, so 19 affirmative. We have 0 negative and we have 5 abstain. So that motion's passed. Excellent. Good start. Flew through that one. Next one is about adding a service request supporting info search parameter. So this was brought up. Talwinda actually raised this at the end of our meeting, our last meeting, when we decided to use supporting info with slices for our additional information. So this proposal is here to support include searches on service request supporting info. A supporting info search parameter is required. This will enable the inclusion of supporting information, e.g. pregnancy status, clinical context, any other supporting info we have with a search for diagnostic request. So there's an example of what that search might look like. So it's service request, you can use any search parameter, but for example, ID, and then you can do an include where service request supporting info to pull in the supporting info resources with that query. Supporting info search parameter will also require conformance updates to capability statements, proposing that the server should support the parameter and it should support include on that parameter. And then the placer, the filler, and the patient actors may use it. They don't have to use it. It's up to them if they use it. There's a note here talking to Talwinda about that. He was a little bit concerned there might be performance implications from doing this. And so given the unknown being a new search parameter, proposed here that the server conformance be should rather than shall to allow flexibility in implementation. This recognises there may be unforeseen challenges in supporting the search parameter across all server environments. So that was the thought there on that. I think David just has this pregnancy status as supporting info. Yes, it is. I'll show you how that's modeled at the moment. Files. You'll see in our diagnostic request, we have supporting info. Okay, so this is our supporting info element, and we have a slice for pregnancy status. We also agreed last week we will have another slice for clinical context, and other supporting info that comes along as we go will add additional slices in here. So this is a way for you to say, when I'm pulling back the diagnostic request, also give me the supporting info with it, so I don't have to make separate queries to go out there. You may or may not want to do that, but it was raised that that was something that we might want. Supporting info is not a standard out-of-the-box search parameter. It's not one that Fire International has already defined. So that's where we're looking here to add one into eRequesting to support that need to include those resources in one query if you want to. Any questions or comments or thoughts on that one?
I was going to say that performance thing, it might help in practice if you put the resource type on the include. Service request, I can't remember the syntax exactly, but something like service request : observation : supporting information. But of course, what you'll have to also do another one for the document reference to get the other clinical information. So you do two: include the observations, include the document reference, and therefore the server doesn't have to iterate through all 130 resources in case there might be some other supporting information there.
That doesn't change the definition of what we're trying to put in here for the search parameter. It's just an example, potentially. We could potentially have an example there.
It's to the last sentence you've got, like,
yeah,
it helps with that problem.
Yeah.
But it does, conformance-wise, that is correct.
Yeah, I think too, it's a little bit of an unknown, but you're right. You can tune it to work more appropriately, but I suppose that does rely on a client to actually specify that as well.
Yeah.
The server gets hammered.
Yes.
So a server may not want to implement it because it can't cope with it. That was the only concern. So. If we're comfortable with this, is anyone interested in proposing to accept this?
I'll put it through the motion to accept this.
Thanks, Angus.
I'm happy to second that. David here.
Thanks, David. So any other comments or questions before we put this to a vote? No.
Sorry, I do have one question, Angus.
Yeah, sure.
Is there any implication, or maybe we can take this offline, but is there any implication on needing to, as the server, needing to support that extended syntax with the type field?
It's really part of the Fire spec, and that's why we were saying it's fine as it is, because all reference search parameters allow you to explicitly say the target resource.
Yep.
But you can also drop it and it will be like any target resource, but then that has performance impact for the server. And so I don't believe we need to state it here. It is the base Fire reference search parameter data type says, you can explicitly state the target resource. I don't think we need to restate that rule. It's kind of mandatory in the base Fire spec that
Okay.
you can do that.
I think that's what I was asking, is it optional or mandatory in the base spec? Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions, comments? No, I will relaunch. So this is the motion to accept The addition of the service request supporting info search parameter as defined. This Jira. We'll just keep that another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that there. Okay, so we have 19 affirmative plus 1 in the chat, so 20 affirmative, 0 negative, and 5 abstain. So that motion has passed. We're flying through them. This must be a new record for TDG. It's like 3 decisions in 5 minutes.
Andy's not here.
Oh, is that the problem? Okay, missing must support and obligations. So we've done a bit of a sort of audit of must supports and obligations. So you may remember, just find it from a previous meeting, we agreed on some default obligations for eRequesting. So we voted on this in a previous meeting, well, these 2 meetings, the 13th of Feb and 27th of Feb. So rather than us having to make explicit decisions every single time we find something new in the IG, we could simply state that the default obligations and must supports would apply. So we have a definition here of all the must supports and obligations. For example, in the cardinalities 0 to many, we do a shall populate if known. If it's 1 to many, it's shall populate. We've got default actor conformance, default search parameter conformance. So we only then need to really state when something varies from these defaults. We don't want to apply the defaults, otherwise we can choose to apply the defaults. So what we've done as part of that is actually go back and see what was missing. And we found a few things that we hadn't made decisions on. So this one covers off missing. The next one we're going to talk about talks about variations, but this one talks about missing must support and obligations. So several elements have been profiled in eRequesting are missing the must support flag and obligations. So there's a proposal here that the eRequesting task, including the derived profiles from that, add the must support flag to the task.meta.tag eRequesting fulfillment task slice. We add the must support flag on task.meta and change the cardinality from 0 to 1 to 1 to 1. So I'll just explain that a little bit. We'll jump to our task profile. So we have our eRequesting task, which is a base abstract profile. In here, we have a definition that we've added. Under task, we've got meta.tag, and we've said that there's a mandatory, we've created a mandatory slice on here, which is the eRequesting fulfillment task tag, which binds to a value set. And in this value set, it's either fulfillment task or fulfillment task group. So what we're using this tag for is identify the type of task that this is. So we have multiple task profiles. By using this tag, you can determine what type of task it is, and whether it's a group task or it's a fulfillment task. So we said that was mandatory. We've got a binding to it, but the actual meta itself is optional. So the proposal here is actually change the cardinality on meta to make it mandatory, because we want this fulfillment task tag to be provided. You can also provide other tags if you want, but you have to at least provide the eRequesting fulfillment task tag. And we want to put must supports on this. So we've added this for a reason. We've made it mandatory. So adding a must support and the obligations that go with it. So it's just something that was missed. We have must supports and obligations on all our other elements, but we hadn't covered off the meta.tag. So that covers off this first part about adding must support to the meta.tag slice, and add it on task.meta and change the cardinality. And this would be the placer is populating that, and then that filler handles it. These are our default obligations, by the way. I just copied them from the defaults. And then the other half of this, another one was missing, was our eRequesting coverage resource. So we're adding must support flag and modify the cardinality to make the type mandatory. So go to that as well. So on our eRequesting diagnostic request, we yep.
Michael, just with the tag thing, the fact that
Yeah.
we're making it mandatory,
Yes.
have we addressed that the server has to allow you to search by it?
No, is there? I wonder if there's probably no search parameter on tag, is there?
So there is base
There is.
spec,
Is there?
but don't we also call out, and for this profile you must support?
For the search, so we do have.
So what search parameters have we made
Yeah, we
mandatory
don't have.
for tasks?
Let's have a look. This is the capability statement. We will have a look. Task. Okay. So these are the search parameters we've identified as ID, last updated, owner, patient, requested. Yeah. So we would want to add.
Yeah.
Yep. So we can make an amendment to this proposal as part of this to add the tag search parameter.
There's no point forcing everyone to mandatory put it in there if you can't then use it.
Yeah. And do you want to explain how you use that then?
The primary reason for it is to register a subscription against group tasks so that you get a notification when a new request is put in the server, rather than you getting 10 notifications because that request has 10 tests on it. So by having a tag on the group task, you can register a subscription to get one notification when a new request is put in. If you didn't have it, you then struggle because your subscription's trying to be for group tasks, not child tasks, so that you don't get spammed with notifications about all the tasks involved in one request. But that to register that subscription, you have to register this. You need the search parameter, and if we're not, as we just highlighted, if we haven't highlighted that you must support that, then potentially someone doesn't support that, and then there's just no point for making mandatory tags.
Yep. So I think that's something we definitely should add as part of this proposal, is to add the tag search parameter with default obligations on it. So we can, when someone's making a motion, we can add that. So the other, sorry, any other comments on the task tag before I do move on to the next one? It was a good point, Angus. Okay, might move. Sorry, Michael.
I'm just wondering how the obligations on that are different to the business status one, because that's switched around. So the actual, the filler is the one changing the business status. You know what I mean?
So this is intended to be put in the resource by the placer, and the filler would never really need to change. The filler doesn't redefine a group, at least not in the world we live in today.
Cool. So that's the difference there. So business status is updated by the filler.
Yes, and yet this tag, there's no intent that the filler would change it.
Yeah, it's on creation of the request that this would get created with the task. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Unless they can't fulfill one of the tasks for some reason.
Well,
this is just the definition of the task, right? This is saying this is what I want. The actual, if you can't fulfill it, then the status of the task can change. But this is the place that defining the task that they want done.
Yeah. this is what I want done. Here's the 10 things it's going to take to do it. And at this point, if I can't do the 8th one, it's not an issue yet.
Yeah,
Well,
we
it is
haven't.
just a fulfillment task. So we want this request to be fulfilled, right? That
All
we
right,
don't
so
have
8,
detailed
all right.
steps. This task,
Right.
it's just a fulfillment task.
So if 8 didn't get done, then the task may not have been the whole group, all the tasks in the group. Yeah, right.
We haven't gone down the road of splitting groups yet, right? So the doctor ordered 10 tasks as one group, like do these 10. And the way we operate at the moment is the lab is going to take on board doing those 10. Now, if they can't do the 9th one, that's an issue they're going to have to sort out. But we haven't walked into a world where the lab creates a second group, moves the 9th one into that group, and says they'll do the 8th in this group, and therefore has to create its own group. Isn't a world we've walked into or attempted to do as yet.
Good. Let's stay away from that world.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, this is more like just metadata assigned by the placer on the task resource instance.
Okay. Might just move on to coverage. So the other one that we had was missing was coverage. Top profile. So we have on our diagnostic request. We have here insurance. So we said you can specify under the insurance element. We have a reference here to AU eRequesting coverage. It is optional, but if you do specify it, we have an eRequesting coverage profile. The only thing we're specifying in here is the type. And this is the one I talked earlier about where we have a binding to an eRequesting coverage type self-pay codes. This is generic one. So yeah, this is a binding. This is the one that would get updated though to the AU base one. But either way, these are the different pay codes that could be used. So we've got a binding on this. So the whole purpose of this, so you could specify the coverage type. And what we had done though is we hadn't made this type mandatory. So you could have actually provided a coverage resource with no elements in it, with nothing in it, and it would be valid. We also didn't provide any obligations or a must support flag on that. So this was just something that was missed when we originally defined the coverage resource profile.
Do you want to click on the additional bindings? I think that's
the additional. That's the one. That's the one I was thinking of. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. This is the cut down list. But this one, I think you missed the beginning of the meeting, Angus. But there's some changes going through in AU base to the fire work group about having a new value set defined in AU base for this, which is Australianised, localized for Australia.
Yeah.
So we would be able to utilize that value set once it goes into AU base. But this is our interim at the moment, where we've defined what we think is appropriate for eRequesting. So back on the proposal here, this was basically saying we'll add the must support and modify the cardinality to make type mandatory. So there was no point providing a coverage resource with nothing in it. We want type. That was the whole point of it. If you don't want to provide coverage, you don't have to, because it is a 0 element. So if you don't have anything, you don't have to provide it. But if you do provide it, we want the type. So that was the update being proposed here. Is we make the type mandatory on the AU eRequesting coverage thing, and we add the default obligations here as well for populating by the placer and handled by the others. Any questions on that one or the proposal as a whole?
I'd like to move this one, Michael Osborne.
Yeah. Angus, did you want to make the amendment propose the amendment for the search parameter.
Yeah, is it an amendment to this, or is it just another task, another thing we need to do? Because
I think we could add it. I think we can add it to this. Like, it makes sense probably to
Yeah.
add it to this proposal rather than have a separate one.
Okay, then I propose to, accept as it is, but with the amendment that a search parameter be defined in eRequesting for meta.tag.
And apply the default obligations to that one as well.
Yes.
Do we
So
have a
as on screen, but with the addition of this meta tag search parameter.
Do we have anyone who'd like to second that?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that. David here.
Okay. Thanks, David. Any other questions or comments before we go into a vote on that?
I'm madly looking at coverage, thinking, is there a reason to give a coverage resource without a type? Because whether you have the resource is optional, right? So it's fair to say there is no coverage resource, therefore the coverage is unknown, and that's fine. Or there is a coverage resource, and now I'm going to look at the type property, but it's not there. So I'm back to my default position. It's just unknown, right? But is there value in giving a coverage resource? Because in it, you're going to tell me something else, like, I don't know, their insurance identifier, or I'm fishing here, I'm not sure, but it's by mandating that you must provide the type, we're forcing future implementations must provide the type, even if all they wanted to do was provide something else in coverage. Like, does it necessarily have to be one-to-one? Because not having a coverage resource is akin to having one with no type, right? I'm just thinking, is there a future use case where you give me a coverage resource, you don't know the type, but there's something in coverage you're giving me that's full? Makes sense?
I think we put coverage in there for a specific use case, which was to define the type, which is why we profiled that and added type. We didn't identify any other elements as must support. So as it stands now, if you provided anything else, it can be ignored in the current definition, because we don't have any obligations there at all on anyone to do anything with anything other than type if we add the must support on that.
Yeah, I'm looking at coverage. To be honest, I'm not seeing anything that screams out that you would provide and yet not know the type.
Yeah. The only other thing you got me thinking about, though, was that in this particular, because I might be covered by two insurance providers, right? I might have a bit by DVA and a bit by Medicare. So there could be more than one.
It is 0 to many on the.
Is it many? I was just trying to.
So on insurance, it's 0 to many.
Okay. Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Covers that. Yeah, look, I think I'm happy. I don't think it's a problem. I'm just looking at coverage going, I can't see why you would give me anything else and not know the type. It's kind of irrelevant to say, there's no point giving me a coverage identifier if you can't tell me it's relevant to what type. Even policy holder, subscriber, all these things, you would need to know the type. So I take it back. I'm happy.
Okay. No, it's good. It's good to have the conversation. Okay, well, we have a motion, we have a second, so I will launch poll. And that is for voting on this proposal to add the must support updates cardinality, as well as adding a tag search parameter with default obligations as well.
To your point, David, there's even a property in coverage called order, relative order of coverage. You could give many, you could even order them in the preference.
Yeah, no, that's right, because different rules kick in at different times for sure. Cheers.
Okay, looks like that vote has stabilized. So, and that.
I just double checked what I'm doing, Angus, and first I check if there's an insurance resource, and then I go off and hit coverage, and I assume that there's something there. There's always a code. Yeah.
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 I think I do the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 15 votes affirmative plus 1 in the chat, so 16 affirmative, we have 0 negative, and we have 8 abstain. So that motion has passed. Okay. The next one is kind of a part 2 to this. So that first one was when we were reviewing the default obligations and found some that were missing. The second one is some conformance and obligation updates that we've already made decisions on some of these, and they differ from our defaults. So this proposal is to align some of those with our defaults for consistency. But this would, if we do progress down this path, it does include a revisit of some decisions made back in July last year. So these were decisions made, I think, probably in our very first meeting on conformance and obligations. So we've gone a long way since then. So we may want to revisit those, we may not. But we have to, if we are going to revisit this, we have to abide by the HL7AU decision-making practices. I'll just go into that quickly so we know what we're getting into. So it's recognised that we shouldn't, revisiting decisions shouldn't inhibit progress and should be discouraged, but the circumstances that might exist warrant reopening. So I think this one warrants reopening because it was way back early on. We've made a lot of decisions since then. We've made defaults, so it's probably worth revisiting. If we want to revisit it, we actually have to have a vote on revisiting it first. And we have to have someone motion that say we want to revisit. We have to have someone second that. And then we have to have a 2/3 majority, 66% affirmative vote that we will revisit. So that's just a decision to revisit. Then we can actually go into the motion and have a motion on the actual proposal. And that's a normal vote, as we've just done multiple in this meeting. So that's the process we go through. And it's up to the TDG on whether we revisit and make changes. So with that in mind, I'll just go back to the changes that we're looking at. And I will put this one in the chat. Probably should have done it with the others, but I'll put this one in the chat so you can follow along at home. So a review with eRequesting Fire IG has identified conformance requirements and obligations that are inconsistent with the agreed default obligations and must support elements and actor conformance requirements. So that's the page I showed you earlier. Some deviations are valid, but others should be aligned for consistency. So these are the ones, so not everything. I think we made some active decisions that we did not want to apply defaults in some circumstances. So they haven't been included in this proposal. This is only proposed ones that stood out as being things that probably should be updated to align with the defaults. So this proposal is to update the eRequesting IG to align conformance and obligations with agreed defaults as outlined in the changes below. So these are the specific updates that are proposed. So on service request, looking at these modifier conformance updates. So for these include parameters on service request patient, service request requester, and service request encounter. So looking at what we have on those at the moment. Show you what some of those look like. Oh, it's under capability statement. So you see these under the capability statement. So you will see on the server capability statement, under service request, we've got here shall support include on patient requester and should on encounter. So actually looking at that, there is no change on server. We'll look at placer. ServiceRequest placer. It says here that it should support the include on patient, requester, and encounter. And that's the same on the other actors as well as filler and patient. So the real change here, there's no change. Probably should have actually left that one off, but that's reaffirming that that's what we want for server. The placer, filler, and patient would all change to may. So that's our defaults now for search parameters. And the like is using may for our client actors because it's up to the client system whether they want to use a search parameter or not. There's no obligation for them to have to use a search parameter, but a server needs to support it. Back on our original decision, there was an active decision to make encounter should, as it's possible that encounter may be implemented as a included resource, and therefore you wouldn't be able to search on it separately. So looking back at the history, that was not looking at changing that, leaving that as a should for that specific use case that was described in the previous meeting. Any comments on the first one, on that include updates? I'll move on to the next one. Okay. I'll jump on to the next one. So default resource implementation conformance. So this is talking about for the server, for coverage, encounter, organization, practitioner, practitioner role, changing all those to shall. Have a look back at a capability statement for server. You'll see these are shoulds. I think you'll find, let's just check which ones we're talking about. Coverage, encounter, organization. So coverage, see here, it's a should. Encounter is a should. Organization is a should. Patient is a shall, but then practitioner is a should, and practitioner's role is a should. So wanting to update all of those to shalls. You wouldn't be able to implement eRequesting as we've got it currently defined if the server didn't support all of those resource types. So looking at changing those to a shall. And then the last one is the diagnostic request must support obligations on identifier, intent, insurance, encounter, and reason coder. We're looking at changing those to shall handle on the filler. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so we have here let's jump through what we've got, identifier intent. Okay, so identify here, we have a no error on the filler. And for intent, we have a no error for filler, insurance and encounter. So same for encounter, no error, insurance, no error. So looking at changing all those to our default, which is just handle. So we're not being more specific on how you have to handle it. Just means you can't ignore it. You need to know it's there, and your system needs to deal with it in some meaningful way, but that's up to you to define what that meaningful way is. It's just updating those to the defaults that we have everywhere else for filler. Any comments on any of those? Is my level of comfort. I will just go back and to that meeting from way back July last year. This was when we were doing task waves, I think it was. We're doing waves of, yeah, we did wave 4 obligations. So this was our very first meeting on obligations. So we had some decisions in here. Here, proposal, eRequest filler, shall, no error. on intent, identifier, and counter reason code of insurance. So this is essentially the part that we're overriding, as well as others which decisions were made when they were implemented about some of the other parts in here. So if we want to revisit this and make those updates to the IG for consistency, we do need someone to make a motion that they would like to revisit the previous decisions, and then we'll need a second for that.
So just to summarize quickly what we're about to do with all that stuff, all we're saying is that all those resources at least have to be acknowledged when because they're part of the message, right? And so you can say, yeah, thanks for sharing. I don't worry about that one. The next one I care about.
It's not part of the business process. We don't need it. But the no error is a very low bar. It basically means I didn't crash, but I threw it away. Right? I didn't even look at it.
Good, thanks.
So yeah, if we do want to make this decision as it is overriding previous decisions, we do need someone to make a motion to revisit if we're comfortable with that. So entirely up to the TDG.
I'll do it. So I move that we revisit this.
Okay, thanks, David. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Steph. Any other comments? All we're voting on here is the revisit. We're not actually voting on the change. We can still vote on the change and then reject the change. So this is just saying we're happy as a TDG to revisit the previous decision. So we're not wasting everyone's time. And that's all this vote is about. We can still vote separate. We will still vote separately on the actual change. And that will be recorded as a separate decision. Any other comments before I launch the vote on the revisit? Okay. So this vote is just to revisit decisions on the previous made decisions on default obligations. Just give that a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. In that poll. So have 14 affirmative plus 1 in the chat. So it's 15 affirmative, have 0 negative, and have 8 abstain. So you'll see some percentages on there, but those percentages are against the abstains. The abstains don't count as a vote. So we have a majority with 15 affirmative and no negative. So that has definitely met our 66% majority on that. So now we can revisit the decision. And jumping back to that. Okay, so the proposal in here is to update the IG to align conformance obligations with agreed defaults. So we've just been through these, updating service request modifier, this conformance, updating the resource type conformance obligations on the server, and also updating these service request element obligations for the filler. Is anyone interested in making the motion to accept those changes?
I'm happy to make that motion to accept these changes. David.
Thanks. Thanks, David. Do we have a second?
I'll second Michael. Steph.
Great. Thanks, Steph. Any other questions or comments on this before we launch a vote?
Sorry, the reason I'm quiet is I'm trying to bring production systems back up.
I thought you were going to say the reason I'm quiet because I'm thinking about it. Silence is agreement, by the way.
Does
so-
Control Alt Delete still work?
Okay, I will launch the poll. So that's to accept this proposal on conformance and obligation updates to eRequesting. I'll give that another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Give that poll. So we have 14 affirmative plus 1 in the chat, 15 affirmative, 0 negative, and 5 abstain. So that motion has passed. Thank you. So that's a good one. That's a good procedural one. Just so we know that process. Absolutely, decisions can be revisited as we become more mature, as we find things that we made decisions on that we don't agree with anymore. That's just the process we need to go through, which is raise a change, we vote to revisit, and then we can vote again. So it's not too onerous for us to go through. So the next one is update CommunicationRequest Reason code and displays and definitions. I think, Steph, you're going to talk to this one, aren't you? Give me a break.
Yes, please.
Are you happy if I share? You want to share?
Yeah, you share. Thanks. Okay, so this change request was more to refine, for clarification purposes, the communication request reason code displays and definitions. So we're not changing the intended meaning of any of the codes here, just clarification. For the first one, so this is to do with the communication request reason value set. So the first code in that table there, urgent, we're proposing a change from the current display, which is urgent request, to urgent results. And that is just to clarify that the reason for the communication request is to communicate the urgent results. We just thought that urgent request might be conflated with the priority on the service request, which includes the code of urgent. So we just wanted to focus that on the reason for the communication request rather than how quickly the service request should be processed, which is about priority. So that's the first change there. And for the definition, just refining that wording and updating it to a request for results to be communicated urgently to the nominated recipient. Any questions on that first one? Yep, happy to move on.
To the next one.
Okay.
Sorry, just trying to. It's taken me a while to process what that was happening there. So the request for something has gone through already, and this is another communication coming in to say, oh, by the way, that request I made, it's urgent. Give me the results.
Yeah, so we've got the task profile for the communication request. Sorry, let me start again. We've got the AU eRequesting communication request profiles, which include the urgent provider profile. I'll just pop that in the chat. Yep, so that one, yeah, sorry, we are fixing that. So we've got one of the profiles on of a communication request being communication request urgent provider. And the definition of that is it represents a request for direct communication from a diagnostic provider, so that's a filler system, to a clinical provider for the purpose of providing urgent results. The communication is not a substitute for formal diagnostic report, but is intended to provide timely notification of a result, usually by phone.
Right. So the request has already gone through. That you're just saying it again. Oh, don't forget, this is urgent. Yeah.
It is with the request. So these are created with the request. So it's the placer creating these communication requests at the time of creating the service request, and they're attaching these communication requests. Saying it's like writing on the paper form.
Yeah, bundled it up. Okay.
Yeah, so then it's not coming later. It's not. It's all part of the original request. It's just providing how you want the results communicated, and that's where we had the urgent, we had copy to, and patient. So this is explaining how you want the filler to communicate with urgent results, copy to, who do you want the results copied to, and how can they communicate with the patient. So that's all the places preferences for communicating results.
Thanks.
So I think that's some of the changes Steph's proposing here. Is it's a request for results to be communicated urgently, right? So this is the request. This is the placer requesting that the filler communicate these results urgently to the nominated recipient.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I'm sort of keen on these next two values because they're all sort of three different concepts here altogether, aren't they?
Yep. So the next one is the communication request reason for that we would use as the fixed value on the communication request for the patient profile.
Steph, do you want to just walk through how this looks in the profile, where these are used?
Yep.
So we have an abstract communication request profile, then we've got a copy to, a patient, and an urgent provider, different types of communication requests. If we look at these let's look at the abstract profile first. The abstract profile has on it, where is this? Which one's it under?
Yep, it's on reason code. Yep,
reason code. It is reason code here.
One.
So what you'll see here, so it is on there. It's on reason code. So we have reason code, which is bound to our value set, and that's what we're talking about. The definitions here. It's urgent, patient, or copy to. So essentially, what we're saying is we have three profiles here, and each of those will have a fixed value to one of these items in this value set. It'll be the copy to, the patient, or the urgent, which distinguishes these as three different types of communication requests. So when the filler gets them, knows, oh, that's a copy to communication request, that's the patient communication request, that's the urgent provider communication request, and they're identified through this binding on reason code. And you'll see here under the copy to one, it's got a fixed value of copy to. If we have a look at patient, it's got a fixed value of patient. And then on urgent provider, it's got a fixed value of urgent. So what Steph's talking about here is just the update to the definition in the value set as to what the display is and what the definition is. So there's less ambiguity about what those definitions mean.
Yep, thanks, Michael. Okay, so the change proposed is going from the current definition, which is the patient has requested the communication, and refining it to a patient's request about receiving communication from a service provider. And that's because the communication request to patient profile is intended to represent communication requests detailing how a patient's preferences about direct communication from a diagnostic provider. Any questions or concerns about that?
I guess the only thing I'm thinking is that they're always going to be, that you'll never have more, sorry, it's 1-to-1, isn't it? You're only going to do one or the other. You're never going to do 2 or 3 reasons.
Yeah, so when a place is creating the service request and the associated communication requests to go along with that, they would be creating separate communication requests if there's patient preferences on how they like to be contacted, or if they don't want to be contacted by a service provider, and if they want the results communicated urgently, then they would be creating a separate communication request.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Instance. Yep.
This is Chris Skeen. I'm afraid I can't find my hand button. There is another thing that comes up in this case which we haven't accounted for, and I don't know if we get it in here, but that is frequently requests for results required by a certain date, though they are not urgent.
It's on the service request, isn't it, Michael? Like on the service, we've talked a bit about this. On the service request, there's a due date or priority that takes a date or something.
I was just going to check the communication request first, but there's a priority, but
yeah, so a case
doesn't look like
someone has an operation or an MDT review, or some other reason why they need to be the results need to be.
But there is, I think there is on the service request.
Not that we've really focused on it, but there's a property here.
Yep, you've just gone past it.
Priority.
No, there was this timing or something.
Occurrence? No.
Occurrence, yeah, it could be occurrence. I used to cover 3: the target date for the test to be performed, the date range for the test to be performed, the frequency for the test. So yeah, occurrence is intended for that purpose. But that's potentially a target date for the future. It's not actually saying it's due. It's not like a due date. I think is what you're saying, Chris, isn't it?
Yeah. No, this was different. This was like, here's the request, but don't go today. I want you to go in 6 months.
In the future.
What Chris is talking about is go get this done today, but tell the radiology people that I want the report by Wednesday.
Yep.
It probably is communication request with some sort of date bounding on it or something, isn't it?
Yeah, I was just looking.
Like urgent results with a date somehow.
Well, it's not even urgent necessarily. Urgent's like as fast as possible, and it sometimes goes into a different queue.
But if we're not going to get it to you fast enough doing our normal process, and you want it faster, then that's almost urgent, isn't it?
That's a triage step, right? The filler's got to look at the target date and figure out how to handle it.
Yeah.
Priority code.
There's nothing.
Occurrence date time. Occurrence date time. The occurrence.
Yeah.
When scheduled.
I think that's the generic. That's the one that's on service request. Time when this is to occur. That's what we've used on service request, right?
But it is a communication request, right? So that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Like, I want this communication of the reports to be sent me by this date.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah,
field itself is not very tightly named.
The problem is then does it have the code? Is it the profile called urgent results? To the point that people were just saying, like, just because I want it done by Wednesday, it's hard to say, does that mean it's urgent or not? You could argue, well, it's not urgent. I just want it done by Wednesday.
Yeah, it is a slippery slope, because sometimes what will happen is that, I guess from my experience at least, that when you actually create it and when you deliver it tends to get mixed up. So, they want it on Wednesday. Let's do it now. We'll just park it and send it on Wednesday or something. Just need to be careful, I think, with the words too.
And if you create like another code, like, I don't know, dated request or something, then the fillers, it's still kind of urgent, and it's kind of like, I don't know. Do you have another code which is now not, so you can have an urgent by Wednesday, but you could also have a not urgent by Wednesday, you know? And then it's sort of semantics as to whether Wednesday is doing it by Wednesday mean I have to do it urgently or not. It's all semantics as to how fast I normally do things.
Yeah, we do have in the definition here that it's not a substitute for the formal report. It's intended to provide timely notification of result, usually by phone. And I think you'll see in here the medium. Is it medium?
Oh yeah, because urgent's kind of like phone it, isn't it? Not
Deliver
them by.
Not deliver the report. It's like call me and tell me the.
Yeah, looking at the base communication request, there's occurrence and there's authored on. So, and the definition of occurrence is when scheduled, and it's got a period. So it's a bit weird, but looks like maybe occurrence is intended to be when do you want it, or you know, could be used that way. And authored on is when it actually happened.
Yeah. I think for the moment, we're getting a bit close to time. I think this is a valid topic to consider and see if we can come up with a proposal that will address that or readdress it. It probably doesn't change this proposal, which is just about updating or clarifying the definitions of what we currently have. Are we comfortable to continue with this, and we'll take the other one as an action to discuss at a future meeting?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. That sounds fine.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Yeah, so Stephanie.
Yep. So the next one is copy 2. So no change to the display, but a proposed change to the definition from another party has requested a copy of the results to a request for results to be copied to an additional recipient. And the rationale for that is that the wording of the current definition, it's not necessarily that another party has requested it. Sometimes it's the requesting clinician nominating additional recipients. So that's just a refinement to the wording there. Any questions?
Steph, are you interested in motioning?
Yep, I'm happy to motion this one.
Do we have anyone who would like to second that motion?
I'll second the motion. Thanks, Michael.
Any other questions or comments before I launch a vote? No. I'll launch vote. So this is to accept the updates to the CommunicationRequest Reason code very set with these changes. Okay, let's give that another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And a couple more votes just to get the percentage up. There we go. Okay, that was good. I think I can comfortably end that now. So we have 14 affirmative plus 1 in the chat. So 15 affirmative, 0 negative, and 5 abstain. So that motion has passed. That's great. Well, that's a good place there. We've got through all the normative changes. So they're things that will make structural changes to the IG that we can get into the snapshot for testing event later in June. The next 2 were informative changes. I don't think we'll get time to vote on that. but I'll run through. We did run through it the last one. We'll have a quick look at it, see if there's any discussion about it. We won't vote today because we don't want to rush the vote. But this one is about adding a security and privacy page to eRequesting. So the eRequesting Fire Implementation Guide currently does not include a security and privacy page, it's a required section for HL7 AU Fire Implementation Guide. So it's something we have to add. We have to say something about security and privacy. So there's a proposal here that we add a new page titled Security and Privacy to the IG with the following content. And this is really, we don't have any specific requirements on security and privacy. So this is kind of just some general guidance saying that when implementing eRequesting, implementers need to be aware that security and privacy are essential considerations. Release 1 of eRequesting does not include specific security and privacy requirements and focuses on establishing the foundation data model and RESTful API interactions for diagnostic requesting. Specific security and privacy requirements may be developed in future releases. Implementers of eRequesting are responsible for applying appropriate security and privacy measures with general requirements provided in AU Core Security and Privacy. So AU Core has a security and privacy page. This is the AU Core one. It's a pretty generic one as well. It just talks about they need to be aware of fire security considerations. They should review the fire implementation safety checklist, and they need to be aware of their obligations, security, privacy, and consent in Australia. And specific requirements is they should conform to fire communication security. They should support smart app launch. They shall use TLS version 1.2 or higher. They should use TLS version 1.3, and they should use the Australian Cybersecurity Centre TLS configuration guidance. So that's pretty generic as well. Just trying to set a very high bar, but a low bar, I suppose, to at least make people aware. I've lost my page now. Here we go. Is there a level of comfort with that? Does anyone have any comments or questions on that? It's a starting point. Obviously, when we do have more specific requirements, we will modify this page and add to it. But that's kind of the starting point.
Yes, that's what I was thinking too. Starting, so it's a good starting.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a placeholder now for as soon as we have requirements, we'll start putting them in there, but they're not things that we're likely to be able to agree on prior to ballot.
There should be a lot of principles that we're just reusing. You know, you don't collect things that you don't have to.
Yeah, and that's all the things that are in that fire general guidance that are actually included in the AU core one. There's a lot of very general. There's a lot of guidance, and there's a lot of really good guidance in there, but it's all of a general nature. So I think we're just pointing you in that direction, saying you should go through this. There's a checklist and all those sorts of things in there that sort of provide that guidance. But we're not saying you must do this. You shall use OAuth with this profiling and the like. We're not anywhere near any of that as a national spec to do that. Requesting.
We're only lagging behind as much as core is lagging behind.
Yeah. If anyone's interested, we can make a motion now, or we can carry it over.
I'd like to motion, Michael.
Okay, thanks, Steph. Your motion. Anyone interested in the second?
I'll second the motion, Michael.
Okay, thanks, Angus. So, any other questions or comments before I launch poll? I'll launch that. So accept the proposal on the security and privacy page you requested. Okay, we'll give that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. In that poll, so we have 15 affirmative plus 1 in the chat, so 16, 0 negative, and 6 abstain. So that motion has passed. I don't know, I think that's nearly a record for us doing decision making. That was awesome. We got through some pretty big decisions there. We got through a lot. We only have got one to carry over. It's an informative change, so there's no issues with that. It probably makes sense to talk about the consent withdrawal one with the other agenda item on updating the policy with My Health Road consent withdrawal. So we'll see if we can roll that into the next meeting. Anyone else who wants changes in the IG before we get to ballot, now's the time, propose a change, contact a co-chair, get it on the agenda. So at the bottom of the IG pages, there's a propose a change button, click that, raise an issue in Jira. If you need any help with that, you can reach out to me or one of the other co-chairs, more than happy to help you raise these changes. So anything that you feel strongly about that you want in the IG, do it now before we go to ballot. It's best we get these things in and right before we go to ballot rather than have to deal with them after. So definitely raise the changes, talk to a co-chair, we'll get it on the agenda and we'll try and get these decisions made in the next couple of weeks. So tying into that, the next meeting is our last real opportunity to do any normative changes, those structural changes. Then the focus is very much on the informative changes, the guidance in the IG. We need a lot of decisions we've made so far. We haven't specifically added the guidance. So we need to put some of the guidance in. We've got the Spark testing event in Brisbane in June. Then we're going to do the Australian Fire Maturity Model level 1 review. We need to get all our profiles to a level 1. They can't go to ballot as a draft, which they currently are. So that's us reviewing them, accepting them as fit for purpose. And then one more meeting to do any last informative changes, any last minute changes. And then we're going to do a ballot review and the ballot gets published. So we're very much at the pointy end now. It's exciting. It's been a long road, but we're getting close now. So it's quite exciting. But yeah, if you've got any issues, anything you want brought up at one of these meetings, please let us know. We'll add it to the agenda. So thanks, everyone. It's been a great meeting. Well done.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.